My name is Nora Kessler and I'm 34 years old. 10 days before Christmas, my mother called to tell me I wasn't welcome at the family gathering this year because my brother didn't want any tension. That's the word my family uses for me. Tension. Not the rumor that's clung to my name for 3 years. Not the money they still owe me. Just me, the tension. The problem guest at the party. I didn't argue. I didn't cry into the phone. But the Tuesday before Christmas, I stood at a shipping counter in my small Minnesota town with 5 padded envelopes and a line of holiday customers stacking up behind me. What was inside those envelopes lit up my parents' phones before the sun even went down. 73 missed calls by 10 that night. And what I said on my own driveway at midnight, none of them saw that coming. Least of all my brother. Welcome back to Untold's secret hub, where the overlooked finally stop footing everyone else's bill. If you've ever been labeled difficult for simply telling the truth, you belong here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, because stories like this one rarely end where the family expects. Now let me take you back to the night the phone rang. The call came at 8 on a Sunday while I was closing out a client's books at my dining table. My mother has a voice reserved for unpleasant errands. Flat, bright, over-rehearsed. She used it to tell me my cat had to be put down when I was 12, and she used it again now. Sweetheart, about the 23rd. Ethan's hosting this year, and he's under a lot of pressure with the new baby, and he doesn't want any tension at the house. So we all think it's best if you sit this one out. I look down at the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop. Numbers are honest. If a column refuses to balance, it tells you so without flinching. Sit this one out, I repeated. Mom, what tension would I possibly bring? Name one thing I've done at a single holiday in the last 3 years. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear their television murmuring behind her. Some cooking competition. Applause rolling in like a tide. She couldn't name a single thing, because there wasn't one. What she said instead was, "Let's just keep it easy, Nora. Keep it easy." My family's whole unwritten constitution, ratified generations before I was born. Then, softer, like she was doing me some kindness, "And don't bring up the other business. It's Christmas." She hung up before I could ask which other business she meant. Because in my family there were 2. There was the thing everyone whispered about me behind cupped hands. And there was the thing nobody ever said aloud. The small matter of a notarized document sitting in my office safe with my father's signature at the bottom. One of those things had ruined my name. The other was about to ruin their holiday. Let me tell you who I actually am, because my family tells it differently. I'm a certified bookkeeper and financial consultant. I run a small 2-person practice out of a converted storefront on Birch Street in Cedar Hollow, Minnesota. My name's on the window in gold lettering. My assistant Priya mans the front desk, 12 tax seasons behind me, and nobody handed me a single one of them. I took night courses for my certification while working full days at a firm downtown, opened my own practice at 27, and paid off my little bungalow by 32. I round to the nearest cent. My family rounds to the nearest convenient story. 5 years ago, my father collapsed in a grocery store parking lot. Emergency bypass surgery. 16 days in the hospital, and a mountain of bills stacked on top of a mortgage they'd quietly stopped paying that spring. By that autumn, the bank was using the word foreclosure in letters that arrived on cream-colored paper. My parents never once asked me directly for help. They simply talked about losing the house, loudly, at every family dinner, angled just enough in my direction that I couldn't pretend not to hear. So I did what I always did. I drained my emergency fund, took out a personal line of credit, and wrote them a check for $61,000. And because that's who I am, I did it properly. A promissory note, notarized, modest interest, $500 a month. My family found this hilarious for the better part of a year. Only Nora would make her own parents sign paperwork. Only Nora would run her family like an audit. But my father signed it at my kitchen table with his reading glasses perched on his nose. And for 14 months, the payments arrived. $500, the first of the month steady as a heartbeat. 14 payments, $7,000. Then, 3 winters ago, the checks simply stopped. And nobody in my family ever mentioned the loan again. You should ask why they stopped. The answer has a name. The answer starts with my grandmother. Grandma Ruth was my mother's mother, and she was the only person in that entire family who ever looked at me like I was something more than a service department. She spent her final 3 years at Willow Ridge, an assisted living community across the county line. Her choice, made with a straight spine. I raised 4 children on nothing, she told us. I'm not auditioning to be anybody's chore. Her hands had developed a small tremor by then, so she asked me to hold power of attorney and manage her finances. Not my mother, not my Uncle Gary, me. You're the only one in this family who reads a bank statement without moving your lips, she said, and then laughed until it turned into a cough. Every Christmas Eve of my adult life, I roasted the goose in Grandma Ruth's enamel roasting pan, heavy, dented at one corner, seasoned by decades of her kitchen. She passed it to me the year her wrists finally gave out, right there in front of everyone. Other people in my family raised their glasses for toasts. I raised the oven door. That was our arrangement, and honestly, I loved my half of it. One December evening, while I basted, and she supervised from her chair with her cane hooked over the counter's edge, she watched my mother rearrange the seating chart for the 4th time and said quietly, just to me, "You don't owe anybody a seat at a table, honey. Remember that." I didn't understand her then. I filed it away the way you file a receipt you don't think you'll ever need again. Her checkbook lived in a small lockbox at Willow Ridge, signed in and out through the front desk because I'd insisted on that too. Remember the checkbook. It matters more than anything else in this story. 3 years ago, in October, I sat down to reconcile Grandma Ruth's quarterly statements against her billing from Willow Ridge, the way I did every quarter without fail. The columns wouldn't balance. I ran the numbers twice, then a third time with a printout and a yellow highlighter, and my stomach went cold and stayed there. $11,200 had left her account over the course of one summer. A string of checks from her personal checkbook, 2 of them large, the rest small. None of them mine, none matching a single invoice from the facility. I did exactly what I'd tell any client to do. I flagged it in writing to the bank that same afternoon. I called my mother, then my Uncle Gary, and told them plainly what I'd found. I offered to bring in an independent forensic accountant, somebody with no last name in common with any of us, to trace every dollar. I put copies of 5 months of statements into a folder for each of them. I want you to notice something. I found the missing money. I reported the missing money. I was the only person in that family asking a single question about the missing money. And at the family meeting that November, in my parents' living room with the good china cups set out, I watched every pair of eyes in that room slide slowly toward the one person who held power of attorney. Then my brother Ethan, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, said the sentence that would cost me the next 3 years of my life. Soft, almost thoughtful, he said, "Well, Nora did handle all of Grandma's accounts, didn't she? I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying." He never accused me of anything outright. That was the genius of it. He just struck the match and stepped back from the fire. A lie like that doesn't sprint, it seeps. By the new year, my Uncle Gary had repeated Ethan's little accusation to both of my cousins with his own extra coat of varnish on it. By Valentine's Day, a woman from my mother's book club squeezed her hand at a luncheon and said she was praying for the family's troubles. In March, the state licensing board received an anonymous email raising concerns about my professional ethics. No name attached, no evidence, no actual complaint. The board dismissed it within 3 weeks. But the word investigation got loose and said are hollow, and words like that don't die quietly. They hibernate. Understand what I did that winter, because my family has revised the record since. I did not sulk. I fought back like a bookkeeper. I mailed every relative a complete copy of Grandma Ruth's records, with a cover letter attached. I asked our family's estate attorney, a careful man named Dennis O'Keffer, to host a meeting where anyone could ask me anything, documents laid out on the table in plain sight. My father declined on behalf of everyone. "This family isn't a courtroom," he said, as though I were the one dragging us all into litigation, when in truth I was the one practically begging to be cross-examined. "Here's the trap nobody warns you about. The one I want you to feel sitting in your own chest. You cannot clear your name if nobody will formally accuse you of anything." There was no charge to answer, no judge to persuade, no court date where the truth would finally get its turn to speak. There was only a whisper carrying my name. drifting from kitchen to kitchen like smoke sliding under a door. You cannot cross, examine a whisper. You can only stand there clutching a folder of bank statements while your family decides, one holiday casserole at a time, that the quiet daughter with all the spreadsheets probably did something with Grandma's money. Grandma Ruth died in February 2 years ago, at 91. She passed in her sleep, in the good building I had personally made sure was paid for down to the last cent. I don't have adequate words for that loss. So I'll give you the paperwork instead, because that's where my vindication went to be quietly ignored. Her estate moved through probate. Dennis O'Kafer prepared the final accounting. Every transaction I had ever made under that power of attorney, itemized, documented, matched to a receipt or invoice. The court reviewed it and approved it, in black ink, on the record. My stewardship balance to the penny. The missing $11,200 was listed too, in careful legal language. Unauthorized withdrawals from the resident's personal checkbook, source undetermined. Copies went to the beneficiaries. My mother and my Uncle Gary. I know they received them, because I watched Gary's wife carry the envelope in from their mailbox, while I sat parked across the street in my own car, like a woman staking out her own reputation. Nobody ever opened the exhibits. A judge had cleared me, and my family never turned past the cover page, because courts don't know Ethan the way family does. At the funeral, my brother orchestrated everything: the flowers, the memorial slideshow, the little printed programs with Grandma's soft, focus photo on the front. People said he held the family together. I sat in the third pew and did the one thing left that was still mine to do. I quietly kept paying my parents' homeowner's insurance, exactly as I had since the year of my father's surgery. $2,200 a year, on autopay, straight from my account, protecting the roof. My $1,000 had already saved once. Call it strategy. Call it a habit of the heart I hadn't managed to break yet. The court had released me, my family hadn't. And neither, if I'm honest, had I. You want to know how a family exiles someone without ever using the word exile? They do it one place setting at a time. The first Christmas after the lie, my mother met me at the door and steered me warmly toward the folding table set up with the children. Just to keep things simple this year, honey. I was 31, seated between a booster seat and a bowl of dinner rolls while my brother held court at the main table over a goose I had personally paid for. The second Christmas, my mother called ahead. Maybe just come for dessert this year. Ethan's doing the whole meal, and you know how things get. I came for dessert. I lasted 35 minutes, and the only person who spoke to me like an actual human being was my niece Willa, who was 11 and wanted help understanding fractions. Last year the invitation shrank again. My mother offered to set aside a plate I could pick up like a takeout order, and I declined with more grace than the offer deserved. And every year, without fail, the requests still found me. Could I order the goose from the good butcher since I got the discount? Could I drop off my folding chairs? Could I bring Grandma's roasting pan, since everyone agreed nothing tasted quite right cooked in anything else? My seat at that table shrank a little more every single year. My invoice never did. This year there was no children's table, no dessert shift, no 35 minutes. There was only my mother's telephone voice explaining that my brother didn't want tension, and a dial tone, and a kitchen that suddenly felt unbearably quiet. I sat there for a long while, staring at nothing. Then my phone lit up on the table beside my cold coffee. A text from Mom. I remember thinking, right before I flipped it over, that it might finally be an apology. You'd think 34 years would have taught me better than that. The text asked me to call when I had a minute. So I did, that same night. She wanted to discuss logistics. Whether I'd leave my folding chairs on the porch, whether the butcher discount could still be arranged even though, well, you know, I let her run out of small errands. Then I asked the only question I had left. Mom, I'll make it simple. Do you believe I took Grandma's money? I heard her breath catch. I heard the kitchen clock over her stove, the one that's ticked too loudly since the 90s, filling the space between us. 7 seconds. I counted them the way you count the gap between lightning and thunder, trying to gauge how far away the storm actually is. She didn't say no. Understand that clearly. A mother who genuinely believed her daughter was innocent has a short, simple answer sitting right there, ready to use. She left it in the drawer instead. What she said Once the 7 seconds ran out, was gentle and tired and final. "Let's just keep it easy, Nora." There it was again. The family motto, stitched onto every throw pillow in that house. I said good night and hung up and sat very still, because here is what I finally understood. Sitting alone in my quiet kitchen with my cold coffee. My mother was not some bystander who'd been fooled by a clever lie. She was the referee. And she had decided the game simply ran smoother with me, in the penalty box, whether or not I'd actually committed the foul. Peace was the only verdict she ever cared about, and peace was cheapest when Nora stayed guilty. What she feared wasn't the truth. She feared the noise the truth would make. I didn't sleep much that night. Some ledgers, once you finally read them properly, can't be unread. My brother called 2 days later, which surprised me until I understood the call was maintenance. Ethan has a telephone voice like warm caramel, smooth, a little too sweet. He's 2 years younger than me, sells commercial real estate, and manages our family the way other people manage a brand. The group chat, the coordinated Christmas card outfits, the flowers at his in-laws' church. That's all Ethan. And I'll say this honestly, he's remarkably good at it. "I just wanted to check in," he said, "because I know Mom's call probably felt harsh. It's not personal, Nora. The family just needs one calm holiday this year. You understand, right?" I asked him how exactly it wasn't personal, given that I was the only one banned. He sighed, and the sigh had rehearsal baked into it. Then he said the thing I want engraved somewhere, because it explains my entire childhood better than any therapist ever managed to. "You've always been better with numbers than with people, Nora. Just let me handle the family. Let me handle the family." As though our parents, our cousins, our dead grandmother's memory were simply accounts in his personal book of business, and I was a billing error he was smoothing over on somebody else's behalf. And here's the strange part, the part I didn't expect. Underneath all that caramel, he sounded exhausted, bone-tired. The way you sound when you've been hauling something heavy for so long you've stopped mentioning the weight of it. I noted it the way you'd note an odd figure in a margin. No explanation yet. Just a flag for later. We said polite goodbyes. He believed the account was settled. But sitting there with the dead phone still warm in my hand, I finally saw my actual brother clearly for the first time in 3 years. This wasn't cruelty, not exactly. This was his job, and I was a line item. Before I tell you what showed up on my porch that same week, let me ask you something. If your family has ever chosen a good story over a plain bank statement, tell me about it in the comments, because for 3 years I genuinely believed I was the only one. I read every single comment. And if you're new here, subscribe, because you are going to want to know what was waiting inside that box. That Thursday, a delivery driver left a carton on my porch addressed to Nora Kessler. Return label reading Willow Ridge, Records Department. I stood over it with scissors in hand and couldn't make myself cut the tape. Willow Ridge had been sold that summer to one of those regional care conglomerates that buys up family-run facilities and repaints the lobby beige. When a place like that changes hands, the old resident files have to go somewhere, and by policy, they go to the last responsible party listed on record. That was me, power of attorney, emergency contact, the one who'd signed every intake form and care plan, and at the very end the other forms, the ones nobody ever frames. Inside that carton was every scrap of paper Willow Ridge had ever generated about Ruth Halverson. 3 years of a life folded into Manila. I wasn't emotionally prepared to bleed again that particular week. It was year-end filing season. I had clients stacked to the ceiling, and I'd just been quietly uninvited from my own family's table. So the box sat on my kitchen counter for 6 days, brown and patient, like a witness waiting to be called. I'd walk past it every night, coffee mug in hand, and feel it watching me. On some level, I think I already knew. Boxes like that never arrive empty-handed. While the box waited, my family got busy online. There's a group chat called Kessler Family Holidays, with a little snowflake emoji beside the name, and it's existed for 8 years. I helped my mother set it up on her phone myself. That Monday morning, between a client's year-end filing and a payroll run, I checked my phone and saw a notification sitting over my banking app like a small tombstone. You were removed from the group. No message. No goodbye. Just the quiet digital sound of a door being stripped shut. Removed by whom, you ask? The group has exactly one administrator, and he sells commercial real estate. That afternoon, my Uncle Gary posted publicly on Facebook, publicly mind you, sicked to the entire county. A little snowy pine graphic with the caption, "So grateful for a peaceful family this year. Blessed beyond measure." 53 likes by dinner time. I recognized at least 3 of those names as clients of my practice, and one as a woman who'd hugged me at my grandmother's funeral. Ethan's wife, Dana, put a laughing emoji on a message I'd sent Willa asking what time her recital started, which had nothing whatsoever to do with anything, but bullies in a pack tend to get sloppy. I want to be precise about what this felt like, because precise is the only thing I have left. It didn't feel like heartbreak. Heartbreak runs hot. This was cold and administrative, like being deactivated. Like watching your own name get quietly archived. That night I stood at my counter, and the box from Willow Ridge was still sitting there, brown and patient. I put down my tea, pulled the scissors from the drawer, and cut the packing tape in one long, clean pull. Then I sat down slowly. Most of the box was ordinary and holy at the same time. Care plans, menus Grandma Ruth had circled in pencil, a photograph from a 4th of July barbecue, her in a lawn chair wearing sunglasses like a movie star. I went through it folder by folder with tax, season discipline, and near the bottom I found copies of the 2 largest checks, the ones probate had already given me images of, the ones that accounted for the biggest bite of that $11,200. I'd stared at those images for 2 years. Grandma's handwriting by then leaned right, in small, sawtooth strokes shaped by tremor. These signatures were smooth as a car salesman's. I knew what I was looking at, knowing isn't proving. Then, in a folder labeled Resident Family Access, I found a single page that stopped my breath entirely. An incident log dated July of the year the money walked. A front desk staff member had noted, in tidy blue handwriting, that the resident's grandson, Ethan Kessler, had signed out the resident's checkbook from the lockbox and returned it during his next visit. There was a signature line for the family member. "I know my brother's signature the way you know a scar on your own hand." The date on that log sat 9 days before the date on the first large check. The second check followed 6 weeks after that. Bank statements, check images, a signed access log with a name attached. For the first time in 3 years, the chain had no missing link. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, not triumphant, just quiet, doing the saddest arithmetic of my life. And underneath everything, at the very bottom of the box, was Grandma Ruth's recipe card for her cranberry, orange glaze, the ink faded pale as a bruise. Sugar, orange zest, a splash of brandy. Her handwriting on that card didn't lean left. It leaned honestly, the way it always had before her hands began to shake. I was still sitting with that incident log the next morning when my mother texted me. "I'm going to give you the message exactly as it arrived, punctuation included, because I've reread it enough times to have it memorized. Leave Grandma's roasting pan on the back porch Tuesday morning. Ethan is hosting. Please don't come to the door. It will just upset everyone. Let's keep it easy." Read that again slowly, the way I did. Not "how are you?" Not "this is hard for us too." My family had barred me from the front door and was now scheduling a pickup at the back porch, like I was a delivery service. They didn't want me at the table. They wanted my grandmother's pan on it. The pan she'd handed to me in that very kitchen, in front of everyone, the year her wrists finally gave out, and they wanted it left unattended on a step before anyone arrived, so nobody would have to suffer the sight of me actually holding it. I walked to the cabinet and lifted the pan out with both hands, the way you'd lift a sleeping child. Enameled steel doesn't care about gossip. It weighs what it weighs. I stood in my kitchen holding decades of my grandmother's Christmases, and I looked at the box of records on my table. That incident log sitting on top like a verdict nobody had ever bothered to read into evidence. And something in me finished a calculation. It had been quietly running for 3 years. I set the pan down on the table right beside the box. The 2 of them sat there together. The evidence and the inheritance. And for the first time in a long while, the math in my house was clean. "The pan stays," I said out loud, to no one, "and so does everything in that box." The next morning I called a number I'd kept in my desk drawer for a year and never once dialed. Renata Ford, attorney. 1 county over, far enough that nobody in her waiting room would recognize my uncle. I brought everything. She read for close to 40 minutes without saying a word, flipping pages with one finger, then took off her glasses and gave me the summary I already knew and badly needed spoken aloud. The promissory note was alive and enforceable. A written contract, 6-year statute in Minnesota, default only 3 years old. Balance owed, $53,800. 14 payments of $500 against 60, $1,000. A demand letter was an aggression. It was the note simply doing what it was written to do, the mechanism my own father had signed at my kitchen table with his own hand. As for my brother, the implied accusation that I'd stolen from a dependent elder had measurably damaged a licensed professional. A cease and desist letter was overdue, and the estate had a clean, documented claim to its missing $11,200. Then Renata leaned back and asked if I understood who the estate's actual beneficiaries were. I did, but she said it anyway, because attorneys enjoy the sound of irony out loud. Your mother and your Uncle Gary, Nora. Every dollar your brother took. He took from the 2 people currently defending him. I laughed once, the way you laugh at a joke that costs you something. Renata drafted 5 letters that week, dense and courteous, entirely without adjectives. I read them at her conference table, and my hand stayed steady, and then I asked if I could take them home unsigned. It's 10 days before Christmas, I told her. Give me a few days. They're still my family. She looked at me the way professionals look at a client who's still bleeding. But she slid the letters into a folder, and I drove home with them riding shotgun. Because here's the truth I'll admit to you, before I'd admit it to any of them. I didn't want to win by mail. I wanted my family to read 3 pages and meet me in the driveway with an embrace. So I made one last attempt. Off the record, I assembled a binder, the court-approved accounting stamped by the judge, the check images, the incident log with my brother's signature, and I drove the 15 minutes across town to my parents' house that very afternoon, straight after picking up the letters. My father came to the door and spoke to me through the storm door, like I was selling magazine subscriptions. I told him I wasn't there to fight, that I was asking for 10 minutes and a kitchen table, that everything in my hands was stamped by a court, or written by a stranger with no side to take. He looked at the binder the way some men look at storm clouds rolling in over a field. We are not bringing lawyers into this family, he said. Your brother cried half the week because of you. Because of me. I stood on the steps my own money had once kept out of foreclosure, and I set the binder down gently on the welcome mat, and told him it would still be true whether he read it or not. Then I drove home. The next afternoon, the binder was back in my mailbox, rubber banded shut, every page exactly where I'd placed it. I'd left one thin strip of paper deliberately misaligned, an old habit of mine, and it hadn't moved a millimeter. Stuck to the front cover was a yellow sticky note in my mother's handwriting. One short line, and a period. Let's keep it easy. I stood at my mailbox in the cold, holding proof no one would even touch, and I finally understood there is no reading list for people who'd rather have the story than the truth. That same week, the rumor sent me an invoice of its own. The Bradshaws, 6 years my clients, a lovely retired couple whose taxes I could practically do in my sleep, came into the office together, which is never a good sign, and sat with their knees angled toward the door. They were moving their business to a firm 2 towns over. No complaint about the work, they were quick to assure me. The wife studied her purse for a long moment and then said, kindly, horribly, we heard some things around church. I'm sure it's nothing, but at our age, we can't really afford question marks. 3 years of somebody else's whisper. And now it was billing me directly, under my own name, on my own storefront window. I thanked them for 6 years and walked them to the door, and did not defend myself, because a defense would have confirmed there was something worth defending against. That same evening, my brother posted his family's Christmas card photo online. Gold script over a pine green background. So thankful for a peaceful holiday this year. 240 reactions and climbing. And there, in the comments, between the prayer, hand emojis and the hearts, a woman from Dana's church wrote the sentence that finally made my decision for me. Every family has one. Bless you for protecting the peace. Every family has one. I sat with my thumb hovering over the screen and felt that word settle into my chest like a stone. I didn't comment. I have never once fought my brother on his home turf, because you cannot out-story a storyteller. The crowd belongs to him. The lighting belongs to him. the edit belongs to him, but I know a field he's never once played on. It has certified mail and return receipts and a judge's raised seal, and the lighting there is fluorescent and very, very honest. The final straw, when it finally arrived, was $2,200. Saturday night, with the return binder still sitting by my front door, my mother left a voicemail. I stood at the counter and listened to it twice, because the first time through I genuinely thought I'd misheard. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not mention the binder she'd mailed back like a rejected fruitcake. She reminded me to leave the pan on the back porch Tuesday before 10, if possible, because Ethan liked to get the goose in early. And then, in the very same breath, in that same bright errand voice, "Oh, and honey, the homeowner's insurance bill came, $2,200, same as always. You'll take care of it like you do every year, won't you? Okay, love you." Click. I stood in my kitchen and actually smiled, which frightened me a little. Banned from the table and billed for the house in the same 7 days. They had, without meaning to, finally written it all down in one place, exactly the way I'd been quietly begging them to for years. "We do not want you. We want what you carry. The pan out of your hands, the premium out of your account, the silence out of your mouth." It was, in its own way, the most honest communication my family had sent me in 3 years. So I answered it honestly. I poured a cup of tea I never intended to drink. I sat down at the table between Grandma's pan and Grandma's records, and I opened Renata Ford's folder, and I read all 5 letters one final time, start to finish, like a professional. Then I took out my good pen, the one my clients sign with, and I signed each letter in turn, and my hands did not shake, not even slightly. Tuesday morning, I drove to the shipping counter. Let me tell you exactly what was inside those envelopes, because precision is the whole point of me. Letters 1 and 2 went separately to my father and my mother, same street address, 2 names, because when 2 people sign a note, notice goes to each borrower individually. Formal notice of default on a promissory note executed 5 years earlier. Original principal, $61,000. Credited 14 payments totaling $7,000. Balance due, $53,800. An offer, in plain language, to resume the original $500 monthly schedule through Ms. Ford's office. No lawsuit filed. Accrued interest waived entirely if a new schedule was signed within 30 days. Attached, the cover page of the probate court's approved accounting, the one that cleared my name, judge's stamp clearly visible. And one further notice. Effective at the next renewal date. I would no longer be paying their homeowner's insurance. Letter 3 went to my brother, a cease and desist regarding implied statements accusing me of theft from a dependent elder, statements that had measurably damaged a licensed professional. Attached A. The check images and the incident log from Willow Ridge, his own signature logged 9 days before the first check cleared. 2 requirements. A written correction sent to every family member who'd received the original rumor by December 20th. And repayment of $11,200 to our grandmother's estate, where the law says it rightfully belongs. Which in the end means it belongs to our mother and our uncle. Letter 4 went to Uncle Gary. The full court accounting he'd never once opened, along with a courteous request to stop repeating claims a probate judge had already formally retired. There was not one line of feeling in any of them. No childhood memories, no old Christmases, no how could you. Feelings had run this family for 3 years and feelings had lost. It was paper's turn now. I asked only for what carried signatures, and not one letter carried more than that. Standing in that shipping line Tuesday morning, I nearly walked out twice. And if you think 5 letters was too far, or if you think 4 years wasn't nearly far enough, tell me in the comments, because I still read every single one. And hit subscribe now. Because the next 12 hours undid 3 years of quiet, and you'll want to hear it straight from me. The Cedar Hollow shipping counter smells like packing peanuts and pine cleaner, and the Tuesday before Christmas it was wall-to-wall holiday shippers, boxes wrapped in brown craft paper, a toddler somewhere near the greeting cards mid-meltdown. I stood in that line like a woman carrying 5 small bombs disguised as paperwork. Twice I let someone cut ahead of me. Twice I glanced at the door, because I knew something the line behind me didn't. There are 2 kinds of mail in this country. Regular mail is a message. Certified mail is a record. The moment those envelopes crossed the counter, My family's rumor and my family's debt would stop being family matters and become documented ones, tracked, time-stamped, signed for real in the one way my family had never once allowed anything to be. Marcus at the counter has handled my practice's mailings for 6 years. He peeled the certified stickers, pressed each one flat with his thumb, and stamped every envelope with that soft mechanical thunk. 5 thunks, like nails going in gently. He slid 5 green receipts across the counter. "Anything else today?" he asked. "No, thank you," I said. "That was everything." And it was. You cannot send the truth once it has a tracking number. I walked out into the cold sunshine, and the town looked exactly the same, and I drove to my office. Then came 2 days of silence, like a held breath. Tuesday, 11:50 in the morning. My phone buzzed once on my desk, delivered 25. I looked at that notification the way you watch a wave approaching from a long way out. I had a client in the chair, a friendly man who ran a small landscaping crew and kept his receipts in a shoebox, so I turned the phone face down and kept working. By 12:20, my mother's face was lighting up the screen. I let it ring. It rang again before the first voicemail chime had even finished. By the time I walked my client out at 1:15, there were 11 missed calls. By 30:26, and the texts had begun stacking like sleet on a windshield. Uncle Gary, all capitals, "Heo duo you do echis toho obuar," a cousin I hadn't heard from in 2 years. Wow. At Christmas, Dana, my brother's wife, showing her whole hand in one line. "This is low even for you, Nora. Even for me." Interesting phrasing, from a woman whose husband's 14 unemployed months I could now account for almost to the day. My father called 4 times in a row at 400 and left no message any of the times. By 6000 the counter read 49 missed calls, and I sat alone in my quiet office after Priya went home, watching the phone buzz itself in slow circles on the desk like something dying. And I felt, I'll be honest with you, calm, scored, and calm. Then at 6:35, buried in the avalanche, one text arrived that was different from all the rest. "Willa, my 11-year-old niece, all lowercase. Aunt Nora, is it true? I saw Dad's letter on the counter. Is it true?" I didn't answer her right away. "Not yet." Priya came back at 800 with takeout, and we sat together at my kitchen table, because that's what a real friend does. Shows up and doesn't perform anything. By 900, the counter finally stopped at 73 missed calls. 783. My family had not called me 73 times combined in the previous 3 years. We ate, and I played the voicemails on speaker, spaced out like tastings of something bitter. My father, early and at full boil. "Lawyers, Nora. Lawyers, against your own mother and father. Call me tonight." My mother later, smaller, crying in that careful way she has, where the tears never once smear her words. "Honey, please. Whatever this is about, we can talk after the holiday. Just please, honey. Let's keep it easy." Even then, even at the very bottom of everything, the family motto, worn smooth as a river stone. It was Priya who noticed what I'd noticed too, and said it out loud around a mouthful of noodles. "She's not asking if it's true. Nobody has asked you if it's true. Nobody ever had, not once in 3 years." The last voicemail of the night came at 9:35, and it was Ethan. I sat up straight, because my brother's voice, the caramel voice, the brand voice, had a crack running straight down the middle of it. No script, short. "Nora, call me before they see the rest, please. Before they see the rest. Not it's not true. Not how could you." His first instinct, with the walls finally coming down, was inventory. What else does she have? I set the phone down and looked at Priya, and neither of us said anything. At 11:40, headlights swept slow across my front curtains and stopped. A car door, then 2 more, and then my doorbell, which almost never rings after dark, rang twice. I opened the inner door but not the storm door, then thought better of it, stepped outside, and stood on my own porch in my cardigan, arms folded against the cold. 3 of them under the yellow porch light, my father in his good winter coat, my mother with a tissue already balled in her fist. My brother half a step behind, like a campaign manager at a bad press conference. Dana stayed in the car with the engine ticking, a silhouette behind glass, watching, not listening. Which, if you think about it, was my entire family captured in one single image. Priya slipped past them to her car with a small nod. Nobody returned it. My father started at full volume, because volume has always been his opening position. "Family. Blood, we raised you. Lawyers at Christmas. What kind of person does that?" I let it land around me like weather. When he finally paused to breathe, I said the first thing I'd said all night, and I kept it level. You're on my porch at midnight, Dad. I've been standing outside the door for 3 years now. We've all stood in the cold. That took something out of him. Fury needs a screaming partner, and I wasn't auditioning for the part. He glanced at my mother, then down at the welcome mat. The same mat where I'd once set a binder he refused to read. When he spoke again, his voice had bargaining in it, which, in my father, is the sound of fear. Look, tear up the letters. Tear them up, and come Tuesday, and we'll forget any of this ever happened. There it was, not an apology, an offer. They hadn't driven 15 minutes at midnight to say sorry. They'd come to negotiate, and my mother stepped forward, reaching for my hands, ready to name the real price out loud. But before she could speak, Ethan stepped into the light, and for the first time in 3 years I saw my actual brother, not the brand. Porch bulbs are unkind. He looked tired the way old plaster looks tired, hairline cracks showing under the paint. You think I wanted Grandma's money? He said quietly. No caramel anywhere in it. Dana was out of work 14 months. 14. We were 2 missed payments from losing the house, and nobody knew, because nobody was ever supposed to know. You want to know what I did with it? Groceries. The mortgage, Willis tutoring. Glamorous, right? He pulled his coat tighter, and the next part came out like a creed he'd been reciting his whole life. I keep this family looking like a family. The photos, the parties, the church committee. That's my job, and nobody pays me for it. You wrote checks. I wrote the story, and the story needed the money to have gone nowhere. It needed quiet. You were already the one they wondered about. The one with the accounts. So it just went to you. I stood there in the cold, and for one honest moment, I understood my brother completely. The same house that had taught me to buy my place with checks had taught him to buy his with appearances, and his ran on fear the same as mine did. He'd stolen quietly for the same reason I'd paid quietly. Because in our family, needing something out loud was the one unforgivable act. Understanding isn't absolution. He let my name burn for 3 years to keep his story warm, but I finally knew exactly what I was standing across from. Not a monster. A bookkeeper of a different ledger. My mother took my hands then, and hers were freezing, and I let her hold them while I finally said what I had never once said aloud, start to finish, in an even voice. The way I'd deliver an audit finding to a client who wasn't going to like it. Let's do the numbers, since nobody else in this family will. 61,000, 5 years ago, so you'd keep the house. Signed, notarized, witnessed. 14 payments came back. 7,000, the check stopped the same winter my name went into the ground. And still I kept paying your homeowner's insurance. 2,200 a year, 5 years running. All told. While I sat at the kids' table, then the dessert shift, then nowhere at all. 11,200 left Grandma's account through her own checkbook. I found it. I reported it. I asked for an independent audit, and this family looked at me like I'd tracked mud across the good carpet. A judge stamped every transaction I ever made, and none of you turned past the cover page. I looked at Ethan. You told me once I'm better with numbers than with people. You were right. Those are the numbers. There's one more line item, and it doesn't have a $sign attached. My name, in a town where my clients sit in the same pew as Uncle Gary. That one's not in the letters, because nobody can pay it back. Nobody spoke. My father was studying the porch boards. Somewhere behind me, in the warm house. The kitchen clock ticked the way another kitchen clock had ticked through 7 long seconds 3 weeks earlier. My mother squeezed my hands, and I watched her gather herself, and I knew, the way you know a storm coming by its particular smell, that whatever she said next was the real reason they'd driven out here in the dark. Honey, she said, warming my hands in her cold ones, her voice suddenly the voice from before all of it. The voice from childhood fevers and skinned knees, and it moved through me like heat through butter. Come Tuesday. Your chair is still there. Nobody's touched your chair. Ethan will tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. A bank error all cleared up, nobody's fault. People forget, sweetheart. They really do. By New Year's it'll be like none of this ever happened. All you have to do is tear up the letters. That's all. Family doesn't need paper. I want to be honest with you about this part, because the easy version of this story would skip right over it. I wanted to say yes. I wanted it so badly my teeth ached. 34 years of wanting it stood up inside me all at once. The chair. the table, the kitchen steam. My mother's hands exactly like this. I saw myself at 7 years old, carrying plates nobody had asked me to carry, glowing every time someone said, "What would we do without Nora?" There it all was, gift wrapped one signature away. And then the words did what words finally do when a bookkeeper holds them completely still. A bank error. My name would come back clean, laundered through one more lie. A fresh one, invented right there on my porch at midnight, some blameless bank institution taking the fall this time. Peace, purchased again with somebody's name. The currency hadn't changed, only whose face was printed on it. And the chair. That chair had been mine only as long as I kept paying the note, and the premium, and the piper, and never one day longer. They weren't offering me my place back. They were offering to sell it to me, again at a new price. Over my mother's shoulder, through my front window, I could see my kitchen table. Grandma's pan sitting on it, dark and patient, my phone beside it, screen still glowing, an 11-year-old's question nobody out here had bothered to answer. I took my hands back gently. "No," I said, and the word came out quiet and whole, like a stamp coming down for the last time. My mother's face began to crumple, and I held up my hand, not hard, just steady, because I wasn't finished. And for once in my life, I was going to finish. Here's what happens instead, and I'll say it once, slowly, because it's simpler than any of you think. I'm not tearing up the letters. The debt is real, so it stays. But hear the rest, Dad. $500 a month, exactly as your own signature promised, through Miss Ford's office, starting January. No lawsuit, no lien. I'm not taking the house. I looked at my father until he finally looked back. I'm not you. I don't take roofs away from family. I just stopped subsidizing mine. Then to my mother, the insurance is yours now. It always should have been. And Ethan, my brother lifted his chin. Campaign face fully assembled, and I almost admired the effort. Your letter goes out by December 20th to every single person who received the other version. The true one, not a bank error. The truth in your own handwriting, or Renata Ford files everything, and it all gets read into public record instead of quietly forgiven over eggnog. It was always your choice. My mother was crying openly now, the careful tears finally gone messy, and she asked the question mothers ask when the price finally lands on their own side of the ledger. Why are you doing this to us, at Christmas? Why can't you just? And she didn't finish, because we both heard the next words coming, and neither of us could bear to hear them twice. Let's keep it easy, I said, was the most expensive sentence this family ever bought. And I kept every receipt. The porch went very still. Somewhere down the street a dog barked twice and gave up. You can have the piece, I told all three of them, ending on my mother, saying it the way you finally set down something heavy and precious. You can have the quiet, the story, the tension-free holiday. Take all of it. I'm keeping my name. And my mother? I want this on the record. Because it is the exact price of everything. My mother straightened her spine, wiped her eyes with the bald tissue, and turned into someone politely finished. Well, she said. Well, and she took my father's arm and she chose him, and the story, and the car, and I stood on my porch and let her. The doors closed, one after another, soft as commas. The engine turned over. Ethan didn't move. He stood on my bottom step with his arms crossed, staring out at the street like it owed him money. We stayed like that a moment, 2 siblings and 1 porch light and 30, some years of unpaid invoices hanging cold in the air between us. You could have just paid it quiet, he said finally, not even angry, almost curious. Same as always. You'd have been back at the table by spring. That's how it works, I know, I said. That's exactly why it had to be certified. He looked at me then, really looked, and I watched the one thing he's genuinely gifted at: run its calculation. The math of audience, and standing and cost. Whatever total he reached, it settled his shoulders half an inch. He nodded, the small nod one bookkeeper gives another across a closed account. He went down the steps, and at the bottom he stopped, back still to me, breath showing in the headlights. The letter goes out Friday, he said. That was all. Not sorry. Not you were always the strong one. My brother has never once apologized in his life, and I'd have distrusted it if he'd suddenly started on my porch. But a commitment with a date attached, from Ethan, that was practically a signature. He got in the car, and my family backed out of my driveway and drove off to salvage whatever was left of their easy holiday, And I stood there until the taillights turned the corner. Then I went inside, closed the door, turned the deadbolt, and the sound it made was small and enormous at once. 12:52, said the kitchen clock. I wasn't even slightly tired. Here is what I did in the first hour of my new life. I took Grandma's roasting pan off the table and set it back on the stove, where it has always belonged. I took the recipe card from the bottom of the records box, sugar, orange zest, a splash of brandy. Her handwriting faded pale but leaning honestly to the right, and I made the glaze at 1 in the morning. In my quiet kitchen, in the pan they had scheduled for a porch pickup, the house filled with the smell of every good December of my childhood. Except this time, nobody was going to hand me a coat and a foil-wrapped plate and the long drive home alone. Then I picked up my phone and finally answered the one message that had deserved an answer all along. Willa. Is it true? I typed, deleted, typed again, and in the end sent her the plainest thing I had, because 11 deserves plain. It's true, sweetheart, and you are always welcome at my table. Always, she wrote back in 4 seconds flat, the way only kids that age can. A single heart. And I knew it. I knew it. I sat down at my table with steam still curling up behind me and finally let myself understand what I'd actually bought that night and what it had cost. For 34 years I'd believed, somewhere underneath all the spreadsheets, that steady payments equaled steady love. That if I kept every account in this family current, someday the statement would come back marked paid in full. Beloved, Ethan believed the exact same thing about his stories. 2 frightened bookkeepers, 1 house, 2 very different ledgers. Well, he was right about me, in the end. I am better with numbers than with people. It's just that numbers told the truth the whole time. Numbers never once lied about me. Tomorrow there would be a table mine, and whoever sat at it would sit there for free. Christmas morning came up clear and bitterly cold. I roasted a goose in Grandma's pan for a table of 5. Priya and her husband, Mrs. Ostrander from next door, alone since her husband passed in the spring, me, and 1 empty chair I set on purpose, because you never really know. At 2 o'clock the doorbell rang, and there on my porch, cheeks bright red, breath steaming, a grocery bag clutched like contraband, stood Willa. Mom thinks I'm at Hannah's, she said. I brought rolls. The empty chair had an owner by 2:15. She ate 2 full plates, told Mrs. Ostrander all about her braces coming off next spring, and washed the roasting pan afterward without being asked, standing at my sink in her socks. And if you think I made it through that afternoon without ducking into the pantry once to collect myself, you overestimate bookkeepers. The Monday after, Ethan's letter went out exactly as promised. My copy arrived Wednesday. 2 cold lines, no apology anywhere inside them. The questions regarding Grandma's accounts were never Nora's doing. I was responsible for the withdrawals, and I am repaying the estate. Signed, Ethan. As a document, it was a masterpiece of minimalism. As a correction, it was enough. Certified, in his own hand, mailed to every mailbox that had once received the original lie. The first week of January, an envelope arrived from Renata Ford's office. My parents had signed the new schedule, and enclosed was the first check in 3 years. $500. The memo line was blank. My father used to write house on every one of them, back when he still wrote memo lines at all. The blank line was its own quiet message, and I chose to read it as a beginning. Mid-January, the Bradshaws came back, a little sheepish, carrying their shoebox of receipts like a peace offering. The wife said only we heard. That's how it goes in a town like mine. The wind doesn't apologize, it just changes direction. Uncle Gary hasn't said a word to me since, not so much as a hello, though I'm told he's stopped repeating the rumor entirely, which, from Gary, is practically a sonnet. My mother sent a New Year's card. Mom and Dad, printed, signed, nothing more. The politest surface in the world, and nothing underneath it either of us is quite ready to say out loud. I put it on the mantel anyway. She's still my mother. The truth is still the truth. Those 2 facts live in separate houses now, and I have finally, at 34, stopped trying to make them split the rent. Some Sundays the phone doesn't ring at all. And I won't dress that up for you. The quiet costs something. I paid for my name with my mother's voice, and there are evenings I stand at the stove and feel the exact size of that particular bill. But here's what I notice more. Most days, nobody at my table this year was paying to be there. Nobody was performing anything. Willa texts me her math grades and her ongoing complaints about the cafeteria menu. And in the spring, she wants to learn how the practice actually runs, because somebody in this family should finally understand where the money goes. The pan lives at my house now, the debt is being paid on schedule, and my name, my quiet, boring, notarized name is entirely mine, free and clear, no co-signers. Here is what 3 years and 5 certified envelopes taught me. Peace that has to be purchased isn't peace at all. It's a debt, quietly collecting interest in somebody else's name, and the family ledger only finally balanced on the night I stood on my own porch in the cold and said, quietly, to the people I love most in this world, you can have the peace, I'm keeping my name. 5 green receipts. 73 missed calls. A goose glazing in Grandma's pan at 1 in the morning. That was the price of my name, and it was worth every single cent. If you've ever paid and paid for a seat you were never actually allowed to sit in, tell me your story in the comments. I read every one of them, and subscribe to Quiet Reckonings, because next week, another quiet person stops paying.